So episode 42 of the podcast is an Illuminati miracle because we are going one-on-one with Paul Bissonnette. Biz, welcome to the podcast, bud.
I'm fucking nervous. This might be the most nervous I've ever been for a podcast. I'm more nervous for this than I am a TNT broadcast.
Come on, what about...
Well, because at least with TNT, I know what they're going to throw at me. You're just an absolute lunatic online, so I don't know what kind of Leaf questions I'm going to get. I don't know where you're coming from.
I'm going to be coming from all different angles, and the first thing I'll ask you is when you were an all-star with the Wheeling Nailers in 2007, you obviously know how many points you had that year, right?
I think I had over 40 in the NHL.
40 what?
47?
42.
42. Fuck, I oversold. God
That's
damn.
Okay. Well, and here you are on episode number 42 of the Illuminati podcast. So we got Illuminati miracles happening already. Yes.
I should call you like what, cuz or my twin?
So, Biz, if I had $1 for every time someone on social media called me Walmart Biz, Biz's baby bastard child, Make-A-Wish Biz, that's one of my favorites. Dollar store Biz. If I had $1 for every time I was commented, I have enough money to buy the Coyotes, maybe.
Yeah, you'd be playing for the Leafs.
I'd be playing for the Leafs, and they could probably use me in net right now.
No, they got this new guy. He's going to be the next Binnington. He's going to come out of nowhere and just steal the show. I mean, hey, I thought he should have been playing in the Heritage Classic. I thought it was absolute bullshit that they didn't put him in for that nationally televised game.
What do you got on?
A sticker on it. Hey, do you believe that they're going to get past the first round? Yes or no? If you had to put every dollar that you got from people calling you Costco brand,
right. No, I would say no. I couldn't. That'd be a stupid bet. I only make smart bets. I couldn't do that. But I will say this. If, and it's a big if, but if the Leafs get out of the first round, watch the fuck out, because there's no team, maybe in all of pro sports, that a first round win would do something for than Toronto. The biggest monkey in the world would be off their back. They could, if they win one round, they could be the most dangerous team.
All of a sudden you see the offensive symphony just floating like a beautiful butterfly.
Yeah. Do you wish you could have played for the Leafs? If you could have continued your career?
When I was put on waivers by the Pittsburgh Penguins, because I think they had enough toughness. I think they had Eric Goddard, and then they picked somebody else up. I think Mike Rupp was there as well.
Yep.
I got 3 claims put on me. It was Toronto, Minnesota, and Arizona.
Oh, wow.
The rule of the worst team gets to pick up the guy off waivers. I was honored when Shiro told me that. I was like, "Are you fucking kidding me? 3 teams want me?" At the time, this is how short-sighted it was. I knew that I was guaranteed NHL money for 1 month. I thought I'd won the lottery because I was making league minimum then, so I was doing the math. I'm like, I'm going to make 20 fucking grand just from getting kicked off waivers, man. I can pay my car off. This is awesome. I was this close to being a Leaf, and everything happens for a reason, though. And if I would have been a Toronto Maple Leaf, I probably would have lasted that 1 month. And I would have spent it all on bottle service.
Oh, Toronto's a dangerous place if you got money, that's for sure. It would have been great to have you in Toronto because the Leafs have always lacked guys with personality and pop, not just on the ice, but off the ice.
I could see why guys are a little bit more reserved there, though, because the media just takes things and runs.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's really and with social media now, I feel like that's why a lot of these guys, I don't think they lack personality. I think they're very protective of how they show it. And I feel like that's really and with social media now, I feel like that's why a lot of these guys, I don't think they lack personality. I think they're very protective of how they show it.
Yeah.
They don't want to be spending time and energy, worrying about quotes that were misquoted or maybe jokes that were misinterpreted the coming weeks, especially in a place like Toronto. So it does suck a little bit because when you talk to these current players, sometimes, like even when we interview them in the podcast, we completely understand why they're hesitant to maybe share stories from inside the locker room or maybe what they're even doing in their personal time.
Yeah. And speaking of that, is that something that you think about? Like, you're a guy who's got like thousands of people hanging on your every fucking word. You know what I mean? And like the other night on TNT, you messed up salary cap. You said cap salary. And if you go to your sorry, yeah, and if you go to your Wikipedia page, it's already been edited to show that you're an expert in the. So is that something that you think about, the fact that like you are so under this fucking massive radar as well?
So, I mean, sometimes when you're trying to sound intelligent, it's difficult. So I'm French Canadian, right? So sometimes the words, they just take a little bit to come out. And one thing, well, this could go a lot of different ways here. I never thought in a million years would I get like a national television gig, because I'm not really polished like that. I talk in a very rough type of way. And not only is it because I'm originally French Canadian, went to French school till grade 7. The only reason I ended up switching over is because the OHL became a strong possibility, in the fact that I was going to have to go away. And I didn't know if I was going to have the option to go to a French school. And you also want to go where all the rest of the guys are going, because you want to be hanging out with your teammates. Yeah. But not only that, but I grew up in a locker room. So every other word's fuck this and this and that. So it has to run through 2 filters. So sometimes I really, really struggle with delivering what's in my brain out of my mouth. And in that situation, so when we're on TV, you have to wear that earpiece. Yeah. The producer is letting you know on time. Liam is so good, right? They could be talking in his ear and he doesn't skip a beat. He's delivering his sentence fluently. He's driving traffic. So I'll be ready to go, and all of a sudden the guy's in my ear while I'm talking, and then I can't, my brain just goes completely numb. When I first started doing it originally with the Coyotes, it would stop me dead in my tracks, to the point where I would just stop talking on television. I've gotten a little bit better, but it still fucks me up. And that was a situation where the segment was running a little bit long. So I had to get out my thought quickly, and I'm like, calorie sap. And I probably butchered my point too. So everybody watching is probably like, this donkey, get off the broadcast, man.
Are you more nervous on TNT standing beside some guy named Wayne Gretzky than you ever were to play an NHL game?
Okay, so I will say we were very, very fortunate, and things always happen for a reason, and I stick to that. Yep. Our first broadcast with Wayne, Charles ended up coming on and breaking the ice. They brought Barkley in, so he just had the whole room in stitches, and it really took a lot of the pressure and stress off of us right off the hop. Yeah. And really, when we had the 5-man panel, that first one, it went really smoothly because of that situation and how Charles was able to lighten the mood in the room. And we were fortunate enough where we kind of gained that chemistry early. And Wayne, of course, he's like, man, like even behind the scenes, this guy's the best. He remembers all the stories, loves grabbing pops with the boys after the broadcast. Wow. And he really just makes it feel like it's a team, whether you're on camera or behind the scenes. So I get nervous before everything. I get nervous before I hop on for a radio hit. I get nervous before I hop on for Zoom calls, for interviews, for podcasts. Yeah. So maybe a little bit more nervous for a TNT broadcast, but I think that it's just because I care and I want to make sure I deliver the goods and I don't fuck up, even though most of the time I do. Yeah. But I would say maybe a little extra added nerves when I'm sitting next to Wayno on a TNT broadcast. So yeah, I know that was a long form answer of how it all goes, but that's kind of the breakdown.
Well, if you're not nervous, it means you don't care, right? That's so true. Just like you said, and that's beautiful. Now, you mentioned as well that things happen for a reason. I'm a strong believer in that. Okay, that prior to this, Frank met Biz in the. When was it? September 2019. You were at Road Hockey to Conquer Cancer in Toronto. Okay.
No, I remember there was 200 teams there. They had what's the beer? Moosehead? Was it Moosehead?
I don't remember. I don't know.
But yeah, there was the beer gardens, a great event, and it's for charity. And we ended up doing the draft the night before at the Hockey Hall of Fame.
Right. Okay. So I was playing in that tourney. And there was buzz around the grounds that Biz was somewhere. And I'm like, fuck. And this was right when I first started doing my Illuminati stuff. And I had done some podcast episodes. I'm like, I'm going to find Biz and see if I ask him to come on the show. So I spotted you at one point. You were crossing a little sidewalk or something. And you had a full pizza in your hand. And you were by yourself. I'm like, okay, I'm going to go up and talk to him. I felt like I was trying to pick up a fucking 10 at the bar walking up to you. Okay. So I walked up to you and I was like, Biz, hey man, I got my own podcast, blah, blah, blah. Love to have you on. And you're like, oh yeah, cool. I'm like, I'm like, can I get your number? And you're like, just DM me. I'm like, no, I'll give you your number, man. Come on. He's like, no, just DM me. I'll answer. So we took a selfie. Okay. And I dug through my phone and I found it. Okay. And there it is.
I will say we look a lot more alike now than we did back then.
We did, yeah.
It's gotten bigger.
Probably, yeah.
Is it getting a little bit bigger?
Yeah, I've matched up a few times since then. Yeah.
I'm a man of my word.
You are, buddy. And just like you said, things happen for a reason, right? Like here we are a little over 2 years later and we're doing this interview. So
now we're playing tummy sticks on the Hockey Illuminati podcast.
Yeah. Speaking of podcast, so you went from a fringe NHL guy goofing around on Twitter to really in not that long of a time period, really co-creating and co-hosting what is the biggest hockey podcast in the world and sharing, the national spotlight with Wayne Gretzky on this panel, TNT. Do you ever sit back and like take a second to hit the pause and like look at your life and be like, fuck, like my life is a fucking like wild roller coaster. Like what is going on here?
Yeah. I mean, especially from the beginning in the fact that even how I made it to the NHL. When I was in the Pittsburgh Penguins organization, I got in quite a bit of trouble off the ice. Like in my early days, there was actually an article that just came out with JT Miller talking about how he was, he made some mistakes and he had a lot of growing up to do where he was late for a practice, missed curfew, all this stuff. Right. And I ended up getting in a bar fight and I got sent down to the ECHL. And I thought that after my entry level contract, I was going to be done playing pro hockey. Like I was trying to figure out, what am I going to end up doing for the rest of my life? And sure as shit, fortunately, it all ended up getting turned around, got called up to the American League. And within, I think, 16 to 18 months, I was playing in my first NHL game in Stockholm, Sweden, in the Globe Series. And you mentioned the fringe NHLer. And if I wouldn't have, I was a defenseman growing up. So if I would have switched to forward and started fighting and really adapted and wanted to adapt to that role, I probably would have never made it to the NHL. And just at the fact I was able to spend the amount of time I did in the NHL, at the fact that I got picked up off waivers, ended up spending 5 years in Phoenix, I just think throughout that time and jumping on Twitter, I just realized that I was never going to be really a great player at the NHL level. And it was more about the friendships and the guys and the stories and all the fun.
Yeah.
And I just really leaned into that. And I was, you talk about the what I've liked to play for Toronto. And I truly believe if I would have ended up there, I would have never even ended up on Twitter to begin with, because when I was with the Coyotes, I ended up starting it because Scotty Upshall was adamant that I hop on. He's like, dude, you are a fucking clown. Like, why don't you, given the fact that you don't have many responsibilities as a player and you're not really leaned on to maybe be, that into it all the time. Like, I think this would be a perfect app for you. And going back to Charles Barkley, I remember reading a quote or something in the news about him saying how stupid it was. It's like, why would I go on an app and like update people where I'm going? And I think he maybe misinterpreted what it was about. And I kind of took his word for it, where I was like, yeah, it seems kind of stupid. So finally, one day in the summertime, bored after workout, I finally taken Scotty Upshall's advice and started it. And the shit that I was saying on Twitter back then would never fly now, and it never would have flown with the Toronto Maple Leafs organization. So it kind of just spearheaded into a social media following, and then it just somehow turned into this media career where, no, I could have never imagined growing up in Welland, Ontario, playing minor hockey, that I would have ended up on a panel with the greatest hockey player to ever exist. So it has just been an absolute whirlwind. There's a million different ways and paths that have taken me to this point, and I'm forever grateful. Sometimes I do sit back and think about it, but I'm the type of person, I tend not to dwell on or think about or ingest what's happening at the moment. I'm always just like, what's next? What's next? What's next? Yep. Stay moving. So it's been a wild ride, man, and I'm forever grateful.
And I can tell you're grateful because you're so involved in the hockey community, doing so many things with so many different people, right? Like, you're one of the most accessible influencers, I would say, that's out there, like here you are on a podcast with a micro influencer like myself, and it's like, it's people who aren't, if you weren't grateful for where you are, with everything that has come, like certain guys wouldn't be doing that. I don't think,
I think that might be personality my father was a social butterfly. So was my mother. So it is naturally genuine. Sometimes it is a little bit difficult now because now all of a sudden you do have maybe more people try to, get you on this, get you on that. And I do hate saying no, but eventually it'll come around. And hey, man, it's just a conversation, right? I like interacting with human beings, and just as much as the people who had more success and the people that I was hoping to get in touch with when I was coming up is the same case for you. I mean, fuck, maybe you're going to be on TNT one day and I'll be begging you to come on my podcast.
Oh, fuck, let's fucking do it, man. That's a wet dream right there for Frank.
Maybe if I'm on the IR, maybe you could hop in and nobody would even notice.
Nobody would know.
It'd be like, fuck, Biz actually sounds intelligent for once up there.
Fuck, did you go back to school while you were on the IR, Biz? What happened?
Holy shit. Somebody got him a dictionary finally. Fucking Rosetta Stone, baby.
That'd be a funny thing to do one day. Oh my God. So speaking of like influencers and guys that you were looking up to when you were coming up, when you first started your, I guess we'll call it content creation career, like Biz Does BC, those types of things, like were there specific content creators or like people in the media that you looked up to as an inspiration?
I always loved Tom Green.
Okay.
I mean, that was just the first name that came to mind. And you go back to that Biz Does BC, and tweeting is a little bit different than actually putting yourself out there, whether it's an internet video or on Instagram or trying to create a series like I did with Biz Does BC.
Yep.
So not to get all like emotional and like Debbie Downer here, but going to all that, and the reason that I ended up diving in so hard after my career was because when I finished in Arizona after my my 5th year in the NHL. I mean, I don't really count the Pittsburgh year because I only played 15 games, but I essentially played 5 full seasons in the NHL, and I couldn't get a deal contract in the NHL after the last year in Arizona. Fortunately, I ended up getting back into the American League, was able to win a Calder Cup, and had a very soft landing till the end of my career. But that 3 years gave me a lot of time to think. And it was unfortunate, though, after I didn't get that contract the next year, before I went off to win the Calder Cup, I spent a few months at home on my couch and I was full on depressed. All of a sudden, my livelihood had been stripped from me and I didn't know what was next. And I think that fear caused me to take a nosedive in as soon as I knew my career was over after my final season in the American Hockey League. So I'd actually met a guy online named Pasha, and I did this like Nike giveaway, and he answered the question first as to, I said, who did I score my first NHL goal against? And he said Carey Price. So I sent him the shoes. I got his address via DM, and I ended up kind of a similar situation to this. Ended up meeting him in the flesh in Vancouver prior to retiring, where I knew that he did videography work, and we kind of just kept in touch. And I had this idea to do this film project out west in Vancouver this summer, right after I'd retired. Like, I was still recovering from my ACL surgery.
Yeah.
We ended up going off and running around BC and making that Biz Does BC documentary. And as goofy and silly as it was, we incorporated, I think, 17 past and current NHL players to film this weird storyline of going through BC and losing the budget and blah, blah, blah. But it really taught me a lot about having to be your own boss, figure out logistics, figure out budget, being in front of the camera, understanding how the camera worked and why certain things were being done and filmed the way they were, how to position myself, trying to figure out the comedic timing, and a lot. It just taught me a lot. And I'm grateful that, looking back on when I was on my couch and that fear that it created about when I was going to retire and what I was going to fall into next, it forced me to be more proactive about it and into that video project and how much I learned about being in front of the camera. So from then on there, it was, and much like this podcast and much like more than I'm going to hop onto, I don't say no to a lot, because even if I do land on my face, it was an experience. I got to learn from it.
Yeah.
It may leave you feeling empty, but you got to get up. You got, just like life, you got to kick the dust off and you got to go on to the next thing. And, along the way, man, I was doing swipe ups for $1,000 just to maybe gain a budget to maybe put it towards my next project or whatever it may be. So when you say micro influencer, it's like, well, I started at the bottom too, man. It's and I really respect your work. I mean, one of the reasons I hopped on is I reached out to you via DM. I'm like, oh, I love following your videos. Like, the shit you say, it's so ridiculous. You could tell you're just kicking up dust, and it's like, whatever, man. It's a fucking game. You got to be silly about it. So you gotta start at the bottom, and I really feel that the people like the Tom Greens and the people that you said, who do you look up to? It's like, I looked up to those people who were OGs and they did it their own way, and they had their own film crew, and they didn't really rely on this. I call it corporate bullshit. It's like, I don't want to be fucking told what to say. Fuck that. That ain't genuine or natural.
It wouldn't be as much fun.
No, I completely agree. And yeah, I think we're in a weird time, like a good time, but I feel like and it's not one network I'm picking on in particular. Like I'm not even gonna say any names of the networks. I just feel that they're from a corporate standpoint, I feel like they maybe lost a little bit of what the viewer actually wants, and I feel like they're now beating to the drum of a very small group of people who are really projecting how miserable they are. And the more that they're listening to that, the more they're getting away from what people actually want. And but the good news about that is all these other outlets where you're able to kind of beat to your own drum and create your own stuff and have the platforms where you can put it on. So it's we're in the wild west now of the internet, and it's a very interesting time. And for you, I think that you should definitely stick to what you're doing, man, because it's a reason why I'm a fan.
Yeah, appreciate that. Love it, man. And you're absolutely right. I want to switch gears here for a second and talk about the NHL. This kind of relates a little bit. Do you think, and there are some people that think this, do you think that the NHL is in trouble a little bit? Because there's no doubt that the league has, especially in the last couple of years, they've lost some fans, okay? Going through what we went through with COVID, turned some fans off. It's incredibly expensive to go to see live games in certain cities, right? I know it's not all the same. The game is not, it's a different game. It's still an amazing game, but it's different from what it was even like 10 years ago, right? Like it's really changed. And I don't know, I see it on social media, comments here and there. Like I feel like the NHL is losing some fans. And at the same time, like compared to like the NFL or the NBA, do they do the same job marketing? I don't think so. Like they're lagging a bit behind.
Oh man, there's so many different ways to go. So I think that the NHL is in a great place in a sense of parity. And I know Carlo Koliakovo is very negative towards the salary cap, like the hard cap. Yeah. And I completely understand that side of it towards, the bigger stars kind of get capped off, and it really benefits the owners. I love the parity as far as play. Like I think any team could come out of the East this year. I guess I don't think as negatively about it as you do, but I also don't have to pay for tickets. Yeah, I think that I agree with you in a sense that they've alienated the lunch pail style fan, right? The common fan, where to bring your kid or your family to a game, you gotta basically dip into like a month's savings after all the bills are paid to be able to go to a Leafs game and get a decent seat and treat the family to dinner and a Leafs game.
You got to take a mortgage out if you want to see the Leafs play.
Yeah, and I definitely believe that is a problem. I don't know how much COVID affected that, and then maybe trying to claw back at the revenue. I would like to see ticket prices definitely go down, but we also talked. You mentioned like from a marketing standpoint, the players are so reserved. Hockey's this like fall in line sport where there aren't enough individual personalities where they're behind the eight ball in a sense of that direction, where they're behind basketball, they're behind the NFL. I tend to think it's climbing above MLB. Yeah. When you say downhill, I actually think it's heading in a positive direction. I think that there are some things that they can change, and like people might be listening and say, "Well, that's a very political answer." It's like, well, no, I mean, it's genuinely how I feel. but I'm also not. I'm not the casual fan, right? So my perspective is a little bit jaded from it all. And I also we do the Spit and Chicklets podcast, so we talk about hockey and the way that we view it, the same way that all the people that listen do. And you mentioned maybe the popularity of it, and I think that that's probably why. Like we just, we're like you. We just go on and we just talk raw about how we feel and the emotion. And the one thing that was pissing me off a little bit, and I really thought that because you brought it back to COVID, I thought there was a strong correlation to everyone really being upset and it being a very negative time, to where every hit was like, oh, give them 10 games, give them 5 games, where the physicality and the roughness of the sport was slowly being taken away.
Yeah.
But I think that now that time is done, and the inflammation of the arguing online has gone down. It's getting back to where there's more hate and there's more fighting and there's more big hits, and less people are bitching about, oh, this guy should be suspended. Look, if you slow it down, look at this frame right here. Look, see, nudging on his chin here. He should get 20 games. Like, fuck off, man. Let's fucking play hockey. Let the fucking men be men, and let's roll here.
Of course, these guys they're being very careful. They know they're their own brands. They're watching out what they do and say in this very politically correct world. But that is something that I hope changes over time, is that we start to see more guys like Trevor Zegras, more guys like Brad Marchand. Like when he stole that guy's phone, like that's unbelievable. Like we need more guys doing that kind of shit. I'm also maybe a little jaded because in Toronto, no one does any of that stuff. Everyone is like, okay, let's go to work.
Well, so we won't name names of teams, but like we've reached out and too close to playoff time to do an interview. We're over 20 games out of playoff time, and it's
like, come on,
we don't want to be a distraction. Don't want to be a distraction. It's like, holy fuck here.
Yeah,
we're trying to grow the game, and I guess if you're in a market where you're bending fans over for fucking $200 a ticket, and you're over $1 billion, I guess you don't really need to worry about growing it. Maybe the other teams. But it goes back to why I was able to tweet the way I was able to tweet, right? Because I was in Arizona and they wanted any type of attention that they could get, rather than maybe playing for a Leafs organization where it's like, well, we're a classy organization. We do things a certain way, and it's just like, sweet. How's that worked out for you? When's the last time you fucking won anything?
Do you think the Leafs are cursed? Like legitimately, I'm saying that as a real question. A, do you believe in curses? B, is it possible they could be cursed? Because what other team loses to a Zamboni driver that they employed and loses a 3-1 lead to a team that shouldn't have been in the playoffs last year in Montreal? Like, to me, curse.
Yeah, I would say that's fair to say. I don't know what it would be though, because you had like the curse of the Bambino, and then the one with the Cubs when they traded did they trade a player for a goat or something?
I think they traded Ruth didn't they trade Babe Ruth for the GOAT? I don't know. Maybe it wasn't.
Maybe I'm getting them mixed up, but the drought has been so long, and I guess why I say it's fair that it's a curse. You look at the financial advantage that the Leafs have. Their skills coach have skills coaches.
Yeah,
they have 5 people in certain positions where some teams don't even have somebody in that position, and the amount of money they spend on trying to win, actually trying. Far exceeds most organizations. Maybe not like New York. And I'd probably say New York is maybe Montreal as well. Like those 3 teams are definitely at the top, where, I mean, they can't even get out of the first round, right? So I don't know what they would attribute it to.
Harold Ballard. Maybe someone's got to go dig up the bones of Harold Ballard.
I'm I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to be digging up any graves for them, but because I mean, it is a pretty good topic for the pod if they don't get past the first round. But no, it's not necessarily a bad thing either. I mean, I don't know what hardcore Leafs fans would attribute the curse to, but yes, I would say that something's definitely broken. Maybe they need some sage around the locker room. Yeah.
Honestly, they got to bring in some like shaman healers or something. Like I don't know. Like they got to do, if they don't get past the first round this year, they got to. I'd be sitting down as an organization and really do some outside the box thinking. And I'd almost like to take this conversation right now for the little bit that we have left in the direction of what do the Leafs do if they don't get out of the first round. But let's think positively and assume that they're going to get out and, save that conversation for another time. I'm curious what does the content creation process look like for a Spit and Chicklets episode, right? So you guys do over 3 hours, per episode once a week, right? How much prep goes into that? How much time are you guys spending as a team sitting down and going through maybe some talking points and things like that? Or is a lot more of it ad lib than what people think?
Oh yeah, no, it's just hit record, but we're throwing everything that we're thinking that we should be talking about into the group chat.
Okay.
And RA forms the outline and it's in a Google Doc, and then we go through it and we understand. Let's say it's like, oh God, we have way too much here. Let's trim the fat. But we usually like to kind of give our 2 cents on some things. RA, most of the time, will just mention and go through things that we don't need to even go into.
Yep.
So we just kind of brief people who might not be on Twitter, might not be on Instagram constantly about trades and the little stuff. But we always have a general direction, but there's nothing going in that's scripted. It's like you bring what you've been reading and keeping up on.
Yeah.
And that's it. Hit record. And then as far as the interviews are concerned, we usually try to get guys who might be relevant as far as a topic, like Zegras. When he was popping off at the beginning of the year and he was a story, it's like, yeah, let's get Zegras on. People want to hear from this kid. He's the new hot thing.
Is there a guy that's never been on that you would love to have on? Who has never been on the show that if you could pick one guy that has not been on for an interview, who would it be?
I mean, Brett Hall is a name that always gets thrown around. Torts would be fun.
Yeah.
Wayne, of course. I mean, the list goes on, and we hope that we're doing this long enough where we do end up getting all these different guests. Like, let's hope we'll pass 1,000, because the even sometimes of the people that you wouldn't have expected ended up being the best interviews. Like we had Tim Stapleton on. I remember playing against him a couple times when he was playing for Chicago in the American Hockey League, and Witt had somehow crossed paths with him, and he knew him a lot better.
Yeah.
And then he comes on and he starts telling these stories about playing in Russia and the Russian gas and these people living at his apartment when he was on the road. And
I saw some of those clips on Instagram. That was fucking hilarious. I remember.
Yeah. So I mean, the list goes on as far as guys you want to get on. And we also like to mix it up with current players who are relevant in today's game, but also the old veterans where we can sit down and talk to them for an hour and a half, like Keith Jones, where they have these legendary stories of exchanges with the GM. Like the Keith Jones came on our podcast where you talked about how buttoned up these kids are nowadays. And it's just a different, these kids are a lot more tamed even than we were. Like they barely even booze anymore.
Yeah.
And Keith Jones is talking about, getting in verbal altercations with the GM because he's trying to send him down to the AHL. Like, it's like, what? Like,
wow.
Shit that even I wouldn't have done. So we like to snap it around and keep it pretty open. And, sometimes there's a little bit more in the news that we get to talk about. And sometimes there's just really nothing that exciting. So we try to keep it entertaining every podcast, but it's definitely a lot more off the cuff than I guess you originally thought.
Yeah. Yeah. Are you surprised that Chicklets blew up as quickly and as big as it did? I mean, I don't think there's no question as to why it blew up, because the hockey world was in need of, raw, authentic, off the cuff talk. But in terms of how quickly everything and Pink Whitney as well, which like you guys should rebrand that to Gold Whitney, because like I'm sure it's making all you guys a boatload of money. But like what do you think about that? Like just how quickly everything took off. Are you surprised? Yeah,
it's still a whirlwind. Yeah, it lightning in a bottle. And I guess like you talk about, maybe where media is at now and what people want to hear. It was what's the term I'm looking for? Like the stars aligned.
Yep. There you go.
I don't know if you like know the whole backstory, but Witt originally reached out via Twitter to me and Corby Armstrong.
Yeah.
At the time, like I didn't even know what podcasts were. When he said that, I was like, "Podcast? What the fuck's a podcast?"
Yeah, it's fucking long time ago.
And I was still playing, so I knew I couldn't come on and let it fly the way that I would have wanted to anyway. So I said, maybe I'll join you when I'm retired. And that was when Rear Admiral reached out to Witt. They started doing it off his couch. Eventually, after about 40 episodes, Barstool ended up picking it up. And then Grinelli had reached out via email to RA. And he's like, hey, you know, I noticed that you guys might be able to use a little bit help on sound and maybe a producer, and then you could just focus more on actually doing the podcast. Ray ignored the email,
Yep.
and then sure as shit, a few episodes later, his mixer breaks that he recorded the podcast on. He reaches out to Grinelli. He jumps on board. I ended up coming on as a guest a couple times. Whit is like, hey man, like, you know, would you ever consider doing this? And I would just finish my first season with the Coyotes and establish myself in my media career. And I hadn't came out with Biz Does BC yet because we were in this bit of a legal battle with the company that I did it with. Because they weren't doing a lot of things that they originally promised. It was a company called Victory.
Okay.
I don't know if you'd ever heard of them. And then I was like, yeah, maybe this would be a good way to get some eyeballs on this project I did. And it was kind of half more self-interest in getting eyeballs on that, but also like, yeah, I'd love to jump on this podcast. I was a lot more raw back then during my single days, telling fucked up stories about how I found myself in these random situations and where I was genuinely at that point in my life. And then it went from, I believe they were getting 50,000 downloads to all of a sudden we were getting hundreds of thousands, just like overnight. And I think that fortunately I had already accumulated all those Twitter followers, so I was able to push it out on those channels. And then that's when it just kind of caught wildfire. And you know, as much as we complain about the people who are complaining online nonstop and bitching about what we shouldn't be saying and you can't do this and you can't do that, them barking about it were the reason that more people were finding out about it. And as much as I can't stand those people, sometimes you got to be grateful for them.
Wow. And again, like you said, it's all this shit happens for a reason. Like, look, amazing how this worked out, for you. And if you had stayed as a defenseman, because I think you were a D-man when you were playing with the under 18 team in Canada, you were still playing defense, right?
Yeah.
If that change had never happened and you stuck with D, do you think that you could have carved out a longer NHL career?
I was a way better defenseman than I was a forward.
Right.
I was a good defenseman.
Right.
Shane Doan always said, he's like, fuck, because I would play D in practice sometimes when like Jans and a couple of the guys would get the optional.
Yeah.
And I would get to play D, and it was my natural position. And I bet you I could outskate myself backwards more than forwards. and he would say, he's like, fuck, man. He's like, you're a fucking good D, man. I was like, I know, man, but it just wasn't in the cards.
Right.
And who knows? But I know that things happen for a reason. And the reason that I ended up playing forward and being a fighter and being a goon and having limited minutes was for the reason I got to hop on Twitter with all my extra time. And the reason that we're sitting here talking and I get to now play on the line with Gretzky.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah.
I think it all evens out in the wash.
Outside of hockey and creating content, is there a hobby that you have? Maybe a topic that you're really interested in that your fans may not know about?
I love real estate. Like I love I'm not a big car guy, but I know I care about the places that I'm going to eventually live in.
Okay.
Yeah. So I want to make sure when it's all said and done, I can bounce around and live in my places. I got a nice place on the ocean in Victoria, BC.
Yep.
I just bought 13 acres in Jackson Hole, and I got a place in Paradise Valley. I also got a couple of rental properties. I guess, I'm interested in finances, like just making sure I'm smart with my money and making it work. Yeah. Outside of that, I do like fashion. As far as hobbies, I'm pretty hardcore at work right now. When it's all said and done, I think I'll be skiing a lot and worrying about my mental and physical health. Yeah. I'm in straight grind mode now. I don't know. I could see myself in 10 years just like being off the grid, just all of a sudden being like, fuck this, I'm out.
Yeah.
Never hear or see from me again.
Yeah.
Maybe at a charity ball hockey tournament. I
think that's the dream of a lot of content creators secretly, because it is a grind, right? Yeah. And I'm sure, I know I've had these days sometimes, I'm sure you have, and a lot of other people in the social media content game, they think to themselves, wouldn't it be nice to just delete everything and just withdraw from the social media cesspool that what it can be a cesspool sometimes. It's also a great place sometimes, but it can be a very, toxic place. And yeah, I don't know. I think that's a fantasy that a lot of people have that are heavily involved in social media.
Yeah, and I think that I think when it's all another reason why I'm grinding like that too is to become financially independent.
Yeah.
Is I would like to do more of the like longer form, whether it's movies or television shows,
Yeah.
but also have the ability to be behind the lens and also maybe spend time on becoming a better actor and making the overall product of what I'm putting out there.
Yeah.
Give it more time, not just, podcasts, like my opinion and all this shit and tweeting all day and posting on Instagram or whatever it may be. So funding my own passion projects later in life will probably be something that I will gravitate towards.
Yeah. Well, hey, listen, man, if you ever shift into a Hollywood career and, you start doing some acting, you're in some movies, you got your stunt double right here. You got your extra. Okay. Just remember that. Okay.
And vice versa.
Or vice versa. Yeah. I'll make that pact with you right now. If I somehow get to Hollywood before you do, then I'll hold up that as well.
Fucking right, buddy. Yeah. I appreciate your time. And sometimes I go long on the answers and there's a lot of so, but we talked about that at the beginning of the podcast. And then I just realized that I had this thing plugged in, but I never used this app StreamYard. And the whole time it was just on the computer settings.
Oh,
so having these stupid earphones in and this mic didn't even work.
It was all dummy stuff.
It was a fugazi, just like the Leafs in playoffs.
It was a fugazi, yeah. This year's going to be different. Okay, but my last question, you asked me this at the beginning of the podcast. Would I put my life savings on the Leafs winning this year? And I said no. That answer is a little trickier for you because I'm sure yours are a little bit bigger than mine. But if you had to make that decision as well, right now, what are your thoughts? Give us a first round Maple Leaf playoff prediction, Mr. Bissonnette.
I mean, can you at least tell me who you think they're going to play?
Okay, I think they're going to end up playing Carolina. I think they're going to slip into the wild card. They're going to play Carolina. And Freddie Anderson is potentially going to cause nightmares for them.
Carolina doesn't scare me for the Leafs.
You don't think
Carolina? No, I think that might play a factor into Anderson's psyche. But I will say, though, they are one of the best teams defensively, if not the best team defensively right now from a team standpoint, not just a goaltender standpoint. But I have this feeling this year that the Leafs are getting past the first round.
Okay.
I have to go with my gut. So, yes, I'm putting my life savings on it.
Okay. I love that. I'm going to.
When I'm homeless, I'm coming to live with you, buddy.
No problem. So, you know what? Let's ride that positive wave. Freddie Anderson has choked in a lot of playoff series for Toronto, and maybe he chokes with the playoff pressure this year again. That would be great. So we will see. Biz, this has been a blast, buddy. Really appreciate this. Is there anything you want to say to wrap up here?
No, this was fun. This was a blast. We should do it again sometime.
Absolutely, brother. There you have it. Paul Bissonnette, thanks for joining the Hockey Illuminati podcast. Guys, make sure you subscribe to the pod and make sure you are following us on Instagram and TikTok. And I'm sure you're already following Biz, but if you're not, check him out on all his social media platforms. Biz. Cheers, brother.
And you can also follow him on Patreon.
There you go.
Yeah, buddy.
Great, brother.